All right, so here in topic 9, we're going to talk about physical health and cultural influences on physical health. So clearly, across different cultures, there's a lot of physical variation, and you can see in this picture the racial diversity of Asia's people. It's an old picture, but you can see though in this picture, there's clearly a very broad uh, variation in the people that live in that single continent of Asia. So we find that, as we discovered in the last topic, that in some ways, physical and mental health might have some global components. That is, schizophrenia rates are fairly consistent around the planet. But we find that some differences can, in fact, be inherited, and I'll describe a little bit more about this. But as you can see here on these three pictures, the top picture has a very light-skinned girl, and she grew up north where there's very little sunshine, and you need to, therefore, in order for her body to efficiently generate vitamin D or synthesize vitamin D, she has to absorb a lot of sunshine. Whereas the picture on the bottom, which is, well, under my face at the moment, is somebody that is, that grew up in a geographical area that had very much sunshine and therefore has much darker skin. Therefore, in order to synthesize vitamin D, this person does not need to absorb as much because there's so much more available. Okay, so we find these physical things is obviously, I mean, poor countries have worse physical health outcomes than countries. Access to, I remember one former student of mine, Benny something or another, and Benny was from Ghana, and I admire Benny a lot because his goal was to get a degree in physical therapy and take it back to Ghana, because according to him at that point anyway, the country of Ghana had like two physical therapists for the entire country. They just didn't have any. Okay, so clearly access is a huge component to how culture can affect physical health. As we can see, also not just, but I mean, what priorities does a country put on physical health? It's pretty clear that the United States is kind of at the bottom of the pile as far as acute care beds per 1,000 people, or pretty much at the bottom, or practicing physicians per 1,000 people. But clearly, if this is a list at the top here, there are definitely going to be, if you continue this list down to more third world countries, their numbers are going to be like zero point 0.1 or something like that. We also find that individualistic versus collectivistic ways of thinking can influence public health outcomes. Um, During the COVID pandemic, what you found is countries with that were more individualistic in nature had very big problems with mask mandates, very big problems. And you can't tell me to wear a mask because, but it's like, but it's the interest of public health. Yes, but you can't steal my individual rights. And so individualistic nations are more likely to tolerate these types of behaviors that are more individualistic in nature. But also, we can have cultural norms, and you find, again, in some cultures, being overweight is a sign of great wealth. Or to the extreme, as you can see in this picture here, what I find to be an absolutely an abhorrent practice of Leblua, and it's in Mauritania. There's other areas there, but primarily Mauritania in northwest Africa. And they truly believe if a woman is not morbidly obese, she will never be marriageable. No man would marry a woman unless she was morbidly obese. And therefore, right from an early age, you can see what they're doing to this little girl is they're force feeding her just bowls of liquid fat, just like 5, 10, 20 times more calories than this girl really should be consuming. And you can see what the woman there is doing is she's got those pairs of sticks as a way to punish the girl if she does not, in fact, consume enough. So it's really to the extreme right there. But what you find is, in just like those pictures previously, that when you look at the amount of sunshine that is available at various lines of latitude, you'll find if there's more sunshine available, then darker is the skin, and if there's less sunshine, lighter is the skin. Huh? We find that human evolution has been influenced by cultural practices. In particular, the one that is best studied is the ability to digest lactose. For mammals, what happens is, in order to digest lactose, and lactose is a protein that is in milk or sugar. Sugar? I guess it's sugar. Lactose is the sugar that's in milk, and what happens is for mammals, they stop producing an enzyme that allows them to digest lactose as soon as they're weaned. And so, therefore, adult animals do not respond well to milk because it contains lactose, and their bodies do not anymore you create the enzyme necessary to digest it. And the same is true for humans as mammals. However, in those cultures where there has been a long interaction with milk producing animals in domesticated agriculture, you find that people then are able to digest the lactose. So it's pretty powerful. Human cultural practices have literally changed human evolution. So you find that the majority of these things are, resistance to pathogens, which I'll describe in a little bit, the lactose intolerance, the thermal regulation. So it's not just, and by the way, it's just not in areas where it's very cold. Human beings, the average human being tends to be shorter and rounder. In areas where there's lots and lots of heat, human beings tend to be taller and thinner, and it has to do with you know it's the surface to volume ratio, and as far as how much heat comes in, how much heat gets out, etc. Uh, but you find cultural practices can influence acquired variation. That is, here in this group of people here in Southeast Asia, you can see on the map they're kind of all over the board here, all over Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, etc. And they have a cultural practice where, from an early age, children swim underwater to catch seafood, so they have to open their eyes. And now, what they have is much better underwater visual acuity than European children. But what happens is European children could acquire this if they were to have those experiences. Okay? You can find one of the biggest acquired variations, physical variations across cultures, in rates of obesity. You can see here the U.S. is number one in the world on the obesity line there. And what you find, and I think we talked about this previously, and if we didn't, we'll talk about it later. I can't 100% remember when I say things. But it turns out if you look at the obesity rates of recent immigrants, it's relatively low. If you look at the obesity rates of long-term immigrants, it almost matches the obesity rates of the United States as a whole. So it's quite, culture does these things to us. Okay? And then again, these obesity rates are partly due to cultural ideals of what equals beautiful, but also cultural access to excess or cultural access to exercise. Some cultures do not have, I mean, if you live in Texas, there's pretty much very little chance to walk anywhere. Okay, I don't know about your neighborhood, but my neighborhood ain't got no sidewalks. So there's just our cultural context discourage physical exercise in so many ways. You find, though, even within the West, there's huge differences in obesity rates. France is about one-fifth the obesity rate of the United States, even though French food is just so filled with fat. Look at those yummy little eclairs up at the top there. Okay, and so it's just a French paradox. But what you find is, even though French food is so fattening, an average serving size. That is, French fries are 70% bigger in the US than France, all right? The meal in a Chinese restaurant is 60% larger. Recipes in the US they call for much larger portion sizes. They create more. Even fruit. American fruit is larger than French fruit. Okay? But on top of the portion sizes, which have been, obviously, I'm sure you're aware, have changed radically. I mean, in the 1950s, French fries were 2.4 ounces. You know what 2.4 ounces of French fries is? 3 bites. All right. And you're like, I don't know about that, dude. I need a little bit more. Look at that. The original fountain drink from McDonald's was 7 ounces. I could gulp that down in one. Ooh, gone. Well, that's what you got. But it's more than just the portion sizes in France, it's the attitudes towards food. Americans tend to eat faster, they tend to view eating. That is to say, Americans, if you say, is this a good analogy? The human body is like an automobile, it needs gas to drive. And Americans are like, yeah, that's pretty much how food works. And the French would be like, no, God, are you kidding me? I mean, food is life. Food is something to cherish. Food is something. Whereas if you take the car analogy, you're like, food is required. It's like, okay, okay. And so they asked people, what is a good analogy? As I already said, the Americans chose a car as a metaphor, but the French said it was a tree. So it's just a different way of considering. Or here in these turn off faces, what you find is they ask people, what's your attitude towards food? And these turn off faces are a very fascinating way to visually represent data. In this case, you're visually representing attitudes towards food. And you can see that the French males and the French females have a very positive attitude towards food. Look at the nice round and happy faces with smiles. But when you move your way over to the right, you can see in the United States, especially for women, the attitude towards food is just food is the enemy. Food is something that I should avoid at all costs or something. Okay? All right.